Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you drive a car, you know the exact feeling. You pull up to the gas pump, stare at that price, and just think, man, am I getting ripped off here? We have literally all felt that universal pain of watching those numbers tick up. But what actually drives those local price differences when you just, drive across town? Is it purely the global cost of oil, or is there a whole mystery happening right down the street from you?
Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're totally cracking open an everyday economic mystery, and we're using a massive mountain of data to do it. The core question we're tackling: does a new gas station opening up actually lower your local gas prices? We're taking a real magnifying glass to this widely held assumption that more competition just automatically equals cheaper fuel for everybody.
So to solve this mystery, researchers couldn't just eyeball one or two local intersections. No, they turned the entire Spanish retail fuel market into a giant laboratory. Between 2015 and 2019, they gathered close to 18 million individual data points covering over 10,000 stations. I mean, this is a near-universal look at a whole nationwide market over a super stable 5-year period. It's a remarkably huge data set.
Now, to understand how market disruption actually works, we first have to see who's being disrupted, right? In Spain, Repsol and Cepsa heavily dominate this market. Together, they make up nearly 60% of all the stations. So the baseline here is a highly concentrated market that's mostly controlled by these giant premium networks. Keep those heavyweights in mind, because we're going to see exactly what happens to them when new players crash their party, a little later in the explainer. But figuring out if new stations actually cause price drops, it isn't as simple as just comparing two random towns. The researchers ran into this massive statistical headache called endogeneity. Basically, that's the problem where market boundaries or store locations are chosen deliberately, which completely scrambles your causal data. Think about it. A gas station owner doesn't just put on a blindfold and throw a dart at a map. They pick highly lucrative, high-traffic spots. So if we just draw a circle around an existing station and look at who moves in, our data's already contaminated, because that new entrant intentionally chose that specific profitable spot. Right, so how do you fix that bias? Well, the researchers used a super clever workaround. They basically threw traditional radius-based boundaries right out the window. Instead, they laid down a rigid 5x5 kilometer grid over the entire map of Spain, like a giant checkerboard. Then they tracked the average prices exclusively within each fixed artificial cell. By doing it this way, the market boundaries were drawn way before any business decided where to set up shop. And that gives us pure, uncontaminated causal data on how a new arrival actually changes local dynamics.
And that brings us to our first major mythbuster reveal. The data is absolutely definitive. When a new station opens in one of these 5-kilometer cells, the average local price drops by roughly 1.5 cents per liter. That translates to about a 1.3% drop from the average price level. So it definitively proves that yes, adding a new competitor physically forces average prices down in that immediate geographic area. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that price drop plays out over time. Right when that new station enters the market, the price falls sharply. I mean, it drops nearly a full cent almost instantly. Then, over the next 2 to 3 months, the price just continues to slide down until it stabilizes. And as time goes on, that lower price actually persists for at least a full year without bouncing back up. There's no sneaky anticipatory price cutting before the new guy arrives either. The incumbents only react once the competition is literally open for business.
Now you might be wondering, okay, 1.5 cents per liter, is that really a big deal? Well, let's translate that abstract number into a relatable anchor for your wallet. For a standard 50-liter fill-up, a 1.5 cent drop means you're saving about 75 cents every single time you hit the pump. In a market where retail profit margins are notoriously razor-thin, this represents a massive hit to the station's profits. And honestly, it compounds. Multiply those savings by all the drivers in that 5-kilometer area over an entire year, the cumulative consumer savings are absolutely enormous.
Which brings us to a really fascinating twist. If opening a station drops prices, you'd probably assume that closing a station would just spike them right back up, right? Well, actually, scratch that. The reality uncovered by the data is totally one-sided. Prices do not robustly change at all when a station closes down.
What's really interesting here is the complete lack of movement. After a station actually exits the market, unlike that steep drop we saw earlier, the price impact basically just hovers right around zero. The data conclusively proves there is no measurable, robust price hike when a station shuts its doors. You lose a competitor, but your local fuel costs stay exactly the same. So, why is that?
Well, the answer lies in this concept of a marginal station. The researchers found that stations exiting the market are generally these weak, low-performing businesses that were already on the verge of closure anyway. They often have spotty reporting, and they're usually already pricing slightly below the incumbents just to stay afloat. Because they're struggling so much, they really don't exert any real competitive pressure on the strong stations around them. So when they finally go out of business, the local heavyweights literally don't even blink. Losing a weak competitor changes absolutely nothing for the local price dynamics.
Okay, so if closing a weak station does nothing, it forces us to ask the big question. Who are the strong stations that are actually causing these massive price drops when they enter? To figure this out, the researchers cleanly split the competitors into two distinct groups. On one side, we've got the premium brands. These are the vertically integrated giants like Repsol, Cepsa, BP, and Shell. On the other side, we have the independent brands. These are the highly automated stations, hypermarkets, and regional low-cost brands like Ballinoil or Carrefour. We really need to see exactly who is fighting for your wallet.
And the gap between these two groups? That is exactly where our mystery gets solved. Look at the data for independent entrants versus the premium brands. Low-cost independent stations drive local prices down by almost 1.9 cents per liter. Meanwhile, when a premium brand opens a new location, they only manage to nudge the price down by about half a cent. It's wild. The independent low-cost entrants exert 3 to 4 times more competitive pressure than the big incumbent brands. So why on earth are these independents so wildly effective at disrupting the market? It really all comes down to their business mechanics. First off, they operate with incredibly lean structures. Second, many of them use totally unmanned or automated setups, just stripping away huge overhead costs. They aren't trying to lure you in with a fancy loyalty program or, overpriced premium beef jerky. Their entire business model is just to dramatically undercut the incumbents. When one of these independent stations opens up in our grid, the established premium brands literally have no choice but to slash their own prices, or they'll just lose all their customers.
So the crucial point is this. Competition absolutely works, but only if it's the right kind of competition. The data from these 18 million observations makes it crystal clear. If you want cheaper gas, the single most effective thing a local market can do is lower the barriers to entry for independent, low-cost stations. Just adding another premium brand to the corner barely moves the needle. Real consumer welfare, the actual savings in your pocket, is almost entirely driven by letting these lean, aggressive disruptors into the neighborhood.
Which leaves us with a critical question for you to consider the next time you fill up your tank. If the data conclusively proves that low-cost, independent stations are the true price disruptors, what is your city doing to let them in? Are your local zoning laws and market policies just protecting the premium giants, or are they actually opening the door for the aggressive competition that genuinely saves you money? Definitely something to chew on next time you're looking at the price on the pump. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.